Hello and welcome to our BBC Microbit Global Code Along. My name is Giles.
And my name is Blonard, and we are part of the education team here at the Microbit Educational Foundation.
Now, does anyone know the theme of today's Code Along? Here are a few clues. There's a butterfly. Okay. That looks like some flowers. Oh, that's definitely a tree. Oh my goodness.
A very large robin.
Yeah, a very large bird.
So well done, anyone watching, if you have shouted out. The theme is biodiversity. Happy International Day for Biological Diversity, or International Day for Biodiversity, as it can be shortened to. The United Nations theme this year is all about building back biodiversity, because we all depend on a wide variety of plants and animals and microorganisms to keep us all healthy and thriving. So in today's Code Along, you are going to be doing your bit as well, because you are going to be building back biodiversity too by creating a biodiversity counter that can be used in your school playground or any other outdoor area you have near your school. And as today is UN Day for Biodiversity, the plan is to create the project in the MakeCode editor, but then to transfer the code onto the microbit and use them outside to count the number of species of animals and species of plants that you can spot. You don't need a microbit to take part in this session, as we will be making good use of the simulator on the MakeCode website. But if you do have microbits, then make sure you have them out ready to put the code on at the end of the session.
And in today's session, we're going to be coding along together. Make sure that you pause the video whenever you need to, and you can replay parts that you need to hear over again. I'm really excited that we're coding the biodiversity counter together, so students all over the world can see what their local biodiversity is like. If you have a school Twitter or X account, then make sure you share how you get on. You can tag us. We are at microbit_edu. That's at microbit_edu on Twitter or X.
That's a really good idea, Giles. It will be lovely to see how different classes and schools get on in their environments. So I think we're ready to get started. Giles, can you think of anything else we need to mention before we start coding?
I think as we're making a species counter, I think it would be really good just to make sure that everyone knows exactly what a species is.
Great call, Giles. Okay, so a species is a set of animals or plants who have similar characteristics to each other. So they all look similar to each other and they have similar characteristics. So for example, let's look at these pictures here. So let me just remove this so that you can see it better. There we go. So in the slide here, we've got lots of different animals, but how many species have we got, Giles?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. It's quite tricky, actually. I'm going to start with the ones that all look the same. So I can see some snails there, some in their shells, some out of their shells. So I think the 3 pictures of snails, that's one species. I can see a robin again, a bird, and I don't see any other birds on there. So I think that's probably another species. We've got 2 butterflies. So I think 2 butterflies are probably one more species. And then I can see a fly and I can see a worm. So I think, have we got 5 species there, Blanid?
Well done. Yes, I think that is spot on. And that means that everyone is very clear and everyone can be super accurate when they go out and they start logging their species later. Thanks, Giles. So let's get coding. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring you to the MakeCode editor website. So you'll find that, you can see it on the banner now, at makecode.microbit.org. This is the perfect place to start for beginner coding because it is free. It is block-based coding, quite similar to Scratch if you've used that before. And it's also something that you can get started with right away without needing any logins or passwords and so on. So there is a sign in button on the top right. So schools with Microsoft or Google logins can use that, but we don't need to. We can jump straight in. Now I've got some projects showing here because I've used it before. If it's your first time, you might not have that, but you will have the new project button, and that's what we're going to jump straight into. Also, in the settings on MakeCode, in the top right, there's a little cog here next to the sign-in button. That's where you'll find different languages if you want to change the language to your local language. So click on New Project. And the first thing it does is ask me to give it a name. So if you're doing the same project as a class, it's a really good idea to make sure that your name or your student's name is included in the project name. And today we're making a biodiversity counter. So I'm going to name my project Bláthnaid Biodiversity Counter and click on Create. Okay, so this has opened up the MakeCode editor. So we can see that there's some blocks of code already in the workspace here on the right. Now I'm going to make that a little bit bigger by using this plus sign in the bottom right-hand side. I'm going to zoom in on my blocks of code a little bit. Do you think that's large enough, Giles?
I think so. I can see that really clearly. Thank you, Bláthnaid.
Okay, brilliant. So this is the workspace. This is where you can drag blocks of code around, and you drag them in from the toolbox over here, and you build your code in this space. Now, we won't need the forever block for our project today, so I'm actually going to show you how to delete the blocks as well by dragging them onto the menu here, or the toolbox, and then just letting go, and it will delete a block. When you have a look inside this menu, you can see that there's lots of pre-prepared blocks of code ready to go. You don't need to have to know what to type like you would in a text-based editor. You can just take the blocks and you can drag and drop them onto the workspace as you need them. On the left-hand side here, we've also got the simulator. So we'll be using this today to check that everything is working before we put our code on our microbit and take them outside to do our biodiversity logging. We'll also be using the download button. If we just take off the banner for a second, perfect, thank you, Giles. So the download button here, bottom left, that will be used at the end of the session so that we can put our code onto our microbit. So we will, if I just show you on my screen, let me get a view of me on the screen for a second. So on the microbit here, we will use the USB lead. We will plug that into our computer, and we'll plug the other end into our microbit, and we will press download, and we will put the code on the microbit and then attach the battery pack so that we can bring it outside into the environment and and use the code we have created that way. Okay, so coming back to our project that we're going to create today. I'm going to stop here and have a little think about what my program is going to do. I want to use my microbit in the playground later to count two different things: the number of animal species and the number of plant species. I want the microbit to count for me and remember how many of these species I've spotted, because there's absolutely no way I'm going to keep all that information in my head. So I want the microbit to remember the information or the data. So that means I need to create two different variables. So in the toolbox here, we've got variables as a red menu section of the menu. So if I click on variables, you'll see it gives me one option right now, and that is to make a variable. So variables are like containers. They will hold different pieces of information, and they will keep updating as we use the microbit and add more information. So the two variables I want to create today are, I click on make a variable and then I name them. So I'm going to call my first one animal species and click OK. And then I'm going to, oh, you see straight away some blocks of code have appeared because I've created this variable. So we've got some other blocks of code here we can use later. And then I click on make a variable again, and I'm going to call this plant species and click on OK. So now I've got options to use these blocks of code to change it from animal to plant when I need it. And I've made my two variables. If I go back into variables here, I can see them sitting here, animal species and plant species. Okay, so let me just delete that properly. There we go. So everyone approaches coding a little bit differently, and sometimes there are different ways to achieve the same things. So Giles, what would you do next now that we've created the variables?
Well, I was just thinking about that. When I turn on my microbit and the program starts, I won't have counted any I won't have counted any animal species or plant species yet. So I'm thinking whether it's a good idea to set both variables to 0. So what I might do is I might go into the variables menu and take set plant species to 0 and drag that into the on start block. Anything you put in the on start block will the microbit will carry out that instruction when the program starts running. So it's going to set the plant species to 0 at the start of the program. Then I drag the same block again. So I go back into variables and drag out set plant species to 0 again, but I'm going to change maybe plant species to animal species. So we have plant species and animal species both set to 0 at the start of the program. Do you think that's a good idea, Blannon?
Yes, definitely. I would have done the same thing at this point for sure, to make sure that our microbit knows to start counting from 0 for each of those variables. There's one other thing I do as well. There's nothing on the screen of the microbit when you turn it on at the moment. And I think it would be useful to also show a 0 on the screen. So I'm going to add in that instruction. I'm going to go into the basic menu. So the menus are all color coded and blue blocks are from the basic menu. I'm going to take the first one here, show number, and I'm going to drag that in to the on start block here. It's already got the number 0 in it. And now you can see the simulator has updated. And when my microbit starts, it will show a 0 on the screen as well. Okay, so let's have a quick recap to make sure that everyone is keeping up when they're coding along in their classrooms. So have you made your variables? Remember, we went into variables, we clicked make a variable, and we made 2, one called animal species and one called plant species. Okay, have you set your variables to 0? We took out this one, set plant species to 0, and we used it twice, but we changed it using the drop-down menu from plant species to animal species, and we popped that into the on start block, and then we added a 0 through using the show number block here in the basic menu as well. Okay, so that means we have got started, but there's 2 very important things that we need to do next, and they're both to do with using the buttons on the microbit, because we're going to be using both button A and button B that are on the front of the microbit. So we're going to use one button to log data about animal species, and we're going to use another button to log the data about plant species. So let's start with button A. Here are a few clues for what we're going to use button A for. Any ideas, Giles?
Well, let me see. We had a butterfly, we've had a bird and a snail. So I think A is going to be for animals.
Correct. Yes, A is for animals, isn't it?
Animals. That's easy to remember.
Yes. So all the pictures are animals. So button A is going to log the animal species. So to make something happen on the microbit, when we press button A, we will need the on button A pressed block. So you'll find this in a new menu, the purpley pink menu here called input. If I go into that menu, the very first block is on button A pressed. So let's pull that out and put that into the workspace. Okay, so we want the animal species variable to update by 1 each time we press button A. So that means I need to go back into my variables menu in here, and now I'm looking at the second block here. I want to change something by 1 when I press button A. Now, when I pull this out, just pop it there for a moment, it goes this strange color because it's not inside a working block at the moment. But I can still manipulate it here. I can still change it to what I want. So I actually want to change the animal species on button A. So I'm going to switch that to animal species. And I pop it inside the on button A pressed block. So that means that the microbit will update the total number of animal species each time we press button A on the microbit itself.
Okay, Bernard, I've got a question here. I've been following along. I've got the same blocks as you, but when I press button A, I just get 0 on the screen, even though I keep pressing button A. Have I done something wrong?
Not at all, Giles. I have the same thing happening on my microbit on here. So I might be pressing on my simulator, I might press button A a couple of times, but my screen has not changed. So you have not done anything wrong. You just have not given the microbit the instructions to do that part yet. Okay. The microbit will only do what you ask it to do. If we want to see the total on the LED display, then we need to put those instructions in and ask the microbit to show it to us. So let's add a few more blocks to make that happen. So if we go into, what are we going to go? We're going to go into basic, first of all, and we're going to scroll down to the show icon block. Okay. So this will help us know that when it shows us data on the LED display, it's talking about animal species data. So I'm going to pop that in here, and I'm going to change the icon from a heart to something that resembles an animal species. So let's have a look. We've got lots of pre-prepared icons here. Right, I'm going to choose the duck. So we've got a little duck icon to stand for our animal species. Right. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into basic, and I'm going to take the show number block again, and I'm going to pop it in below. Now, this time I don't want the show number block to show us 0. I want it to show the total number of animal species on the LED display. So I've got to go back into variables and find my animal species block, the small one here. So I take this out, and you can see how it can slot in over the 0 and replace it. So we do that, and then our code will update. Okay, so now if we test if it's working on the simulator, it should work this time. But actually, I've got an idea to test that, Giles. So do you remember this slide that we looked at earlier?
Oh, yeah.
Was it again? How many times should I press A if these were the animals I'd seen outside?
Oh gosh, right. I'm trying to remember again. We had snails, and that was one species, and then we had 2 butterflies, but that's only one more species because they're both the same species. So that's one more. And we had a bird, and we got a fly, and I've got a worm. So I think it was 5 different animal species that we have there.
Correct. Well done, Giles. Yes. So on my simulator now, I am going to press A 5 times, and let's see if we can see something happening and see. Yes, there we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've now given the correct instructions. Yeah. So we can see now that when we log one, it will give us some feedback on the LED display to know that it's happened. So if everyone has got this part coded, then that means we are halfway there. Fantastic.
Fantastic. So we're halfway there. And we've told the microbit what to do when we press button A when we're counting animal species, but we haven't yet told it what to do when we press button B. Now, I wonder if anyone can remember what are we going to count when we press button B? Can anyone remember that? I wonder if we have some. Right. So we've got some flowers. We've got a tree. And some more plants.
Oh, is it plant species, Giles?
It might be plant species that we're getting when we press button B. So what we want to do is we want to use button B to log plant species. So what we can do now is we can duplicate or copy the blocks that we have for button A. I wonder, Blanda, could you show us how to do that? So
Yes.
can you just tell us what you're doing there to get that menu to pop up?
Yeah, so I've put my cursor over the entire block on button A pressed, and then I've right-clicked, and then I get the menu with duplicate at the top.
So you can duplicate. That's one way of doing it, or you can just fetch the blocks again from the toolbox in the middle, but just because it's quicker and easier, we're going to show you how to duplicate. So if you click on that and duplicate the block, you'll see again, a bit like it did before, the blocks have gone a funny color. And that's because we've got 2 on button A press blocks, and we can only have one set of instructions for what to do when you press button A, otherwise the microbit will get really confused. So first thing we need to do is to change button A to button B.
Yep.
And then because we're not counting animal species anymore, we need to change animal species to plant species. And I think it would be a good idea to show a different picture at this point,
Yes.
not a duck. So we'll pick something else. So if you click on that, have a look and pick something. I think there's a fork icon that looks a little bit like a tree.
Yes.
That's it. That one. We can pick that. You can also draw your own plant icon as well if you like. You can use the show LEDs block in the basic category and you can draw your own picture of an animal or a plant. But we're just going to pick the fork icon because it looks a bit like a tree. And then I think there's one more thing we need to change. Yeah, well spotted, Barnard, because at the moment the code is going to show the animal species number when we press button B, and that would be wrong. So we need to click on the little arrow at that and change that to plant species.
Perfect. Thank you, Giles. I think that's looking like it should work really well. And we should be able to test out button B on the simulator now as well. So if I was outside and these were all the plants I saw while I was in my playground, how many plant species would I log? How many times would I press button B?
Oh, that's a good question, because I can see lots of flowers there. So I might want to keep clicking and click lots of flowers, but I need to think. I need to be really careful about this. I think there are only 2 species here because I've got flowers like daisies. They look the same. So although there's lots of flowers there, that's only 1 species that I've spotted. And then there's some ivy, some leaves growing in the middle. So I think here, if I saw that when I went outside, I would log 2 plant species. I would press button B twice.
Fantastic. That is very accurate and correct. So I'm going to do button B twice now on my simulator. And there we go. We can see the plant icon came up and the number came up each time as well, which is exactly what we've asked it to do using the code. So
that's fantastic. Blanit, that's really good. But the number just flashes up. What if I can't remember the number of animal species and plant species? Is there a way we can get to see the sort of running total without having to add a new one each time?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I can't remember now even how many animal species we'd already logged a few minutes ago. So we definitely need to add that in, because we don't want to get our numbers muddled up. So let's use the icons again to make it clear which total is coming up on the LED display. But let's also use a new input. So we've used button A and we've used button B to do our actual logging. But now let's use the touch logo on the front of the microbit as the input to show us our totals. So you'll find that in the inputs menu. And if you scroll right down past where it says microbit V2, right down here, we get the on logo pressed block. So if I pull that out now, I'm going to use this as my input. Now, I said we wanted to use the icons again. So that's the next thing we're going to do. We're going to go to basic. We're going to drag out our show icon, pop it in here, and I'm going to change this one to the animal icon we'd selected earlier. And then I want to show my total number of animal species counted. So if I go back into basic, take show number, pop it in, and then I find my variable, my animal species variable in the variables menu, pull that out, and that goes on top. So that means when you press the logo, the duck icon will come up, and then the total number of animal species. Now, I also want to see the plant species, but I don't want it all to happen too quickly. It needs to be clear when we read it off the screen. And then when there's numbers that are 2-digit or even 3-digit numbers, they will scroll. So we need a little bit of time for the microbit to do its thing. So we're going to leave a small pause. So if I go back into basic and scroll down, find the pause block. I'm going to pop that in, and let's pause for 2 seconds. that shows up as 2000 milliseconds on the block. And then I'm going to go back into Basic another time, and I'm going to get the clear screen block here, so that the screen goes completely clear before it gives me any of the plant species data. So now I want to show the plant species data. Actually, I'll just do one more pause before that. So I'm going to duplicate that block, just to be doubly sure that the screen clears and has time to clear. Now, back into Basic, take your show icon, change that to our tree-like icon here. Go back into Basic, take another show number. And this time in the variables menu, I choose plant species and put it in there. So hopefully that will have given the microbit the instructions needed for us to see the totals on the screen when we want to recap how many we've counted of each. So shall we try it out on the simulator now, Giles?
I think that sounds like a really good idea. Right, I'm going to put you to the test. I'm going to show you some pictures and see if you can count along and correctly count the species.
I'm going to reset my microbit first, just
Good plan.
to clear any of the data we've done so far. So you would do that on the real microbit with the reset button on the back, but I've just pressed this symbol here on the simulator. Okay, test me.
Fantastic. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
That's a tree, so that's a plant species. So that's one plant species so far. Oh, that's another tree. So hang on, I need to have pressed B once, but not again because they're the same species.
Well done. Okay, let's try it one more.
Right, that's a different plant species. So I'm going to press B again because that's the second plant species I've seen. There's our lovely robin. That's an animal species, a bird. Okay.
And I'll give you one more.
Okay, fantastic. That's another animal species. So let's see. If I go to my touch logo and I click this now, let's see what happens. Animals 2. Should clear the screen.
There's a little pause there.
2. Fantastic.
Fantastic. Well done.
Woohoo. So that's it. If you have got this far with us, you have now coded your biodiversity code along, biodiversity counter, I should say, that you can use outside in your playground.
Lots of applause and cheering. That's marvelous. So once you know the current number of animal and plant species, you could monitor whether this changes over time because you could count them again in the future. You might want to try some things in your local environment to improve biodiversity and see if you get better numbers next time, if you get a more diverse environment with more different kinds of plants and animals. And there's lots of other things you can do with that data that you go outside and collect. You could present it in bar charts or other kinds of graphs, tally charts. You could share your findings with other classes in your school, or you could compare your playground to other outdoor environments such as parks or maybe even another school.
Fabulous. So thank you for those ideas, Giles. They're really useful. We have finished coding, but there is one more really important thing to do. You need to transfer the code to your real life microbit so you can use it to count biodiversity in your playground outside or another outside area. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the USB cable to plug our microbits into the computer or laptop that you've been using. Now, if you've been using tablets, then obviously there's a different way to transfer the code. I won't demo that today, but the link that is now showing on screen will give you all the different options for how to get code onto your microbit, tablets included. So you can have a look at that instead. But I'll just do a very quick demo of how to get it on if you're using a laptop or a tablet or a desktop computer. So the small part of the USB cable goes into the top of the microbit, so you can see there, and then I'm going to plug this into my my laptop that I'm using. So I'm plugging it in here. The USB end of it goes in. Okay, now I'm just going to share my screen before I plug the rest of it in. So 1 second, stop there. I'm going to go to this. Okay. Now, if I do this way and I get up my downloads, you will see something appear in this menu on the left when I plug in my microbit. So I've plugged it in. Keep an eye here. Ta-da! The microbit drive has appeared there because my microbit has been plugged in. So I know that it's connected. And so now that I've plugged it in, on my MakeCode editor, I need to click on the download button and follow the instructions on screen. So I click that now, download, and it's downloading to my microbit. Now, if it's the first time you've downloaded it, it may ask you to pair it first, but you simply follow the instructions on screen and it will then give you the option to download it. If that doesn't work for any reason, there's also a drag and drop method where if you download the hex file using the 3 dots next to the download button, you can click on download as file. Okay, that has now gone to my downloads. You can see it here. There's our project that we just made. And I can now drag and drop that on top of my microbit drive, and my microbit will start flashing on the back. So I know that that's working as well. So that's another way to get it on. Okay, so once you've got it on there, of course, the next thing to do is to plug your battery pack in, unplug it from your computer, and then you can take it outside and get going with logging the diversity all around you in your environment.
That's absolutely fantastic. So huge thanks to all of you for joining our code along today. Remember, do get in touch with us by tagging us. You can do that on Twitter or X using @microbit_edu. It'd be great if you could show how you got on making your biodiversity counters today and how you use them.
Yes, thank you to everyone who's joined in. We hope you've had fun coding your biodiversity counter, and good luck investigating biodiversity in your local environment.
Bye.
Bye for now.